Have you ever wondered which country in the world gets the most rain? And no, before you get ahead of yourself, this time the answer has absolutely nothing to do with the title of this video. The country where it rains the most on the whole planet is none other than Colombia. But no, this video is not about the land of coffee and Shakira, so despite not being number one on this particular list, our protagonist today, Singapore, is still one of the leaders in this world ranking. Specifically, it occupies the 14th place, with about 95 inches, or 2,400 millimeters per year of average rainfall. Given that fact, the first thing we might imagine is that Singapore has plenty of water, right? Well, no, or at least not exactly. The truth is that despite being one of the rainiest countries on the planet, it suffers from water shortages. So the two key questions that come up here are, how on earth is it possible that they suffer water shortages with all that rainfall and being as small as they are? What has Singapore done so far, and what does it intend to do to tackle this problem? Do you remember the video we made about Israel and the miracle of water? Well, pay attention, because the city of Merlion does not want to be left behind. Let's go. Singapore is a truly fascinating country, a place we love talking about on VisualPolitik. Now, while we normally cover issues like legal security, the economic model, or even military defense, this time we're going to take a look at a radically different topic: water. I know, I'm sure that at this very moment, many of you are wondering, but Josh, what the hell does water have to do with politics? Which, after all, is what this channel is supposed to be about. Well, the truth is that it has a lot to do with it, much more than you might think at first. You see, although Singapore is one of the countries where it rains the most in the world, the problem is that it is also one of the most densely populated. With about 5.5 million inhabitants in an area of just over 270 square miles, that's 700 square kilometers, there's not enough space to store the fresh water that falls in the form of rain. It would be hard to imagine, for example, a massive reservoir in the middle of the city. Surely not possible. In total, this city-state has 17 water catchment reservoirs, but not surprisingly, most of them are very small and are not able to meet the enormous demand for water that this city has. It is precisely for this reason that water management has become a key issue in the country's politics. In fact, Singapore is considered one of the most water-stressed countries in the world, this time ranking first in the list of the 33 countries at extreme risk of water stress by 2040. Of course, thanks to its economic prosperity, the city is growing steadily, and with it, the demand for water. Take a look. Of course, it's not just about population. Despite being an eminently urban nation, more than 55% of all water demand comes from economic activity, not from households. A percentage that is expected to increase to 70% by the year 2060. I have already told you that Singapore is growing all the time. Industry, tourism, even agricultural experiments that we covered in a past video here on VisualPolitik. So, with all this in mind, the question then becomes, how on earth can water supply be generated in a country with a territory increasingly under pressure from the growing needs of housing, industries, hotels, and businesses of all kinds? What plan do they have up their sleeves in one of the wealthiest and most prosperous territories in the world? Well, let's take a look.
Water is also political.
As I've already mentioned, the city of Merlion, the lion with the body of a fish, is one of the most urbanized, densely populated, and most water-dependent places in the world. The capacity to build infrastructure is limited in theory. It's basically a question of square footage. That is why about half of all water consumed in the country is imported from its nearest neighbor, Malaysia. Well, as it happens, this is where all the fuss comes in. The pure and simple politicking of the whole matter. Because VisualPolitik fans, the water supply in this city-state depends today primarily on a long-standing and well-negotiated agreement on the part of Singapore. An agreement with the authorities of the state of Johor that the Malaysian government does not like at all. Thanks to the agreement with the state of Johor, Singapore operates a dam that currently allows it to import about 198 million gallons, or 900 million litres, of untreated water per day from the neighbouring country. The problem for the Malaysians is the price. The Singaporean and Johor state authorities agreed on a compensation for the extracted water of 3 Malaysian sen per 1,000 gallons, which is equivalent to about $0.007 US per 3,785 litres of water. The reason the price price is so derisory is that it cannot be changed unilaterally. The agreement, which came into force in 1962 and is valid for 99 years, establishes that the price cannot be modified after the first 25 years. In other words, the price since 1987 has remained unchanged. That's not all. The agreement also includes a clause that obliges Singapore to sell back to Johor up to 2% of the water it imports after being treated and being made safe for drinking, at a price of 50 cents per 1,000 gallons. In other words, Singapore imports 1,000 gallons of untreated water at 3 cents and sells 1,000 gallons of treated water at 50 cents. In addition, the agreement did not provide for any kind of price revision based on inflation or anything like that. A good deal for Singapore, don't you think?
Singapore, clear, consistent in position that Malaysia has lost right to review water price under 1962 agreement.
So, as you can imagine, all this is something that has generated enormous frustration for Malaysia. Hardly surprising when the deal effectively means giving away their water to Singapore. So there has been a lot of back and forth and diplomatic conflict between the two countries over water. And of course, that's what explains news headlines like this.
Mahathir revives water dispute with Singapore, calls 1962 deal ridiculous.
But now hold on a minute, the agreement is not forever. As we've told you, it has a duration of 99 years, which means that in 2061, Singapore will lose its right to import water under such advantageous conditions. What's more, as we've already explained in a past video, Singapore has a fortress mentality, so they don't want to be so dependent on a third country for something so vital. They consider it a strategic weakness, almost a national security problem. And yes, I know, the year 2061 is still some time away, but do you know what? In Singapore, they're already preparing. We've told you about this in a lot of videos. These people like to be cautious. So, no sooner said than done, the Singaporean government has set itself the fundamental goal of achieving water self-sufficiency by 2060 at the latest. This is a gigantic challenge for which the city-state has launched a plan that combines the reduction of consumption, the use of every last drop, and of course, the ability to produce clean water on its own, to achieve an abundant, economical, and potential unlimited supply of fresh water. Want to know how they hope to achieve this? Well, check it out.
The 4 taps of Singapore.
As I told you at the beginning, despite the fact that rainfall in Singapore is very abundant, the problem is that they have no usable groundwater and no large bodies of fresh water available. It goes without saying that there is no room for large reservoirs. In order to solve this problem, current water management is based on what has been baptized as the 4 national taps. That is, the country's 4 major water sources. The first of these is precisely the one based on the collection of water from local basins to feed a network of micro reservoirs and reservoirs. In order to enhance the source of water, as early as 1972, Singapore promoted the so-called Water Master Plan. This plan consisted of identifying all possible catchment areas and reservoirs to collect rainwater and use them in the water supply system. Thanks to this plan, new reservoirs were created, bringing the total number of reservoirs to 17. Among them is a large urban reservoir that bathes the heart of the city-state, including its most famous landmark, Marina Bay. Yes, that's right. Surprising as it may sound, since 2008, that huge lagoon, Singapore's historic signature bay, the place where the Merlion spurts its water, has been converted into a freshwater reservoir. We've already explained the second national tap, water imported from Malaysia, a source that is expected to run dry in 2061. And finally, in third and fourth place are new water and desalinated water respectively. And take note, because these 2 domestic sources are most interesting and the key to achieving water self-sufficiency, especially new water. New water is one of the most advanced reclaimed or recycled water systems in the world, and Singapore's main bet for achieving water self-sufficiency. It consists of a 4-barrier filtration system that converts wastewater, that is, water that has already been used, into potable water. First, the water goes through a conventional purification treatment, then it passes through a second stage consisting of a micro and ultrafiltration system through extremely fine membranes. The third stage consists of reverse osmosis, a pressurized purification system that removes unwanted molecules, ions, large particles, and salts and minerals that you don't want to be there. And finally, as a 4th barrier, ultraviolet rays are applied to disinfect the water of bacteria. Sounds like a complex system, but in reality, it's not so complex. Singapore already has 5 new water plants dedicated to wastewater reclamation, and a 6th will be operational by 2025. And okay, I'm sure you're wondering, but is this water safe to drink? Well, yes, the answer is yes. It is water that is perfectly acceptable for human consumption. In fact, the new water process has passed more than 150,000 scientific tests that have led to its approval by the World Health Organization and its qualification as ultra-clean, safe drinking water. Despite this, and I suppose as a matter of misgivings, don't tell me you wouldn't have them, new water is usually supplied separately, mainly for industrial and commercial uses, or for things like industrial-size air conditioning cooling systems. Because yes, in Singapore, air conditioning is a critical appliance. But hold on, wait a minute, because that is slowly changing. Some of this water is used to supplement the domestic drinking water supply. How? Well, some of it is pumped and mixed with water from reservoirs for domestic consumption. And of course, given the existing limitations, water pumped by new water for domestic consumption is becoming more and more significant. In fact, it is expected to account for more than half of all water consumed by 2060. Not even Israel has come that far yet. And then finally, we would have desalinated water. This 4th national source is not so new, it has been around for a long time. Singapore currently has 4 desalination plants that are capable of meeting a high percentage of the water demand. So much so that by 2060, desalinated water is expected to supply up to 30% of the national demand. This, added to the water coming from the new water plants, is expected to guarantee up to 85% of the national water consumption, allowing, in addition, to have significant freshwater reserves in the main storage network. Isn't that incredible? Of course, if we consider both the cases of Israel and Singapore, it seems that when we talk about water scarcity, what we really mean is water mismanagement. The fact is that this plan is how Singapore hopes to achieve self-sufficiency by the year 2061, when the contract to import water from Malaysia expires. At that time, it is expected that the 4 domestic taps will become 3. Obviously, this plan entails a gargantuan effort and significant investments, which are, of course, not free.
Singapore to raise water price by 30% over 2 years.
On the other hand, in the near future, Singapore may become an important exporter of water management and water treatment technologies. Just think what these techniques would mean in countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, or even in a place with such disastrous water management as India. And what can I say? If anyone knows how to make money, it is precisely the people of Singapore, right? Money in exchange for prosperity and fresh water for all. But having come this far, it's your turn. Do you think that technological advances will solve the world's water problems in the future, and with them, the possible political challenges that may arise? Will Singapore's technology mean the end of water scarcity? Leave us your comments below, and if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to VisualPolitik, and even more importantly, if you like what we do and want more, we invite you to join the Patreon community. In addition to helping us to continue creating independent content, you will be able to receive the weekly snapshot, Latam Politik, or exclusive products among many other things. We'll leave you the link below in the description. All the best, I'll see you next time.